The final day at Branham High. On June 16, 1978, Branham High School in San Jose, California, had just wrapped up the academic year. The students were gone for summer break, and only teachers remained on campus, using the quiet halls to clean out their classrooms and prepare for the months ahead. The atmosphere was routine, subdued until it was abruptly shattered by a horrific discovery. That afternoon, a student who happened to be on campus found the body of Diane Peterson. The nature of the attack, a single, fatal stab wound, raised immediate questions about motive, opportunity, and the identity of the perpetrator. She had suffered a single stab wound to her chest. The moment the student alerted authorities, the school grounds transformed from a place of learning into an active crime scene. What began as a quiet summer day in an otherwise calm school ended with a tragedy that would remain unsolved for decades, haunting a community and baffling investigators for years to come. Peterson's body was found inside the school building, suggesting that the attack had taken place within the halls of what should have been a secure environment. Teachers who had been present that day were questioned, along with anyone who might have had access to the school during the break. Still, the details remained scarce. No murder weapon was recovered at the scene, and there were no immediate suspects. Because the school was largely empty and the summer recess had just begun, there were very few people around to witness anything. The narrow time frame and limited presence of potential witnesses posed immediate challenges for investigators. The shock reverberated quickly. What had begun as an ordinary day of end-of-year housekeeping, a community in mourning. The news of Diane Peterson's murder spread quickly through San Jose and the Branham High School community. In a matter of hours, what had begun as a quiet start to summer vacation became a moment of collective grief. Teachers who had just said goodbye to their students were now facing the devastating loss of one of their own. For many, the hallways they had walked daily now felt unfamiliar, stained by violence. Peterson's sudden death struck a nerve beyond the school campus. She wasn't just a colleague or a teacher. She was a well-regarded member of the educational community. The fact that she had been killed inside the very institution she served added to the sorrow. Her classroom, once a place of learning, had become the site of her final moments. Investigators launched into their work amid an environment clouded by sorrow and confusion. Staff, students, and families were grappling with fear and disbelief. Questions arose with few answers. Who could commit such an act? How had someone entered the school? Why would anyone target a teacher? As the investigation unfolded, those who knew Diane Peterson struggled to comprehend the loss. A family member, choosing to remain anonymous, later described her simply and powerfully. Diane was a beautiful and wonderful person who is missed dearly. The sentiment reflected what so many felt. Her absence was profound, and her presence had left a mark. In the days that followed, there were no arrests and no known motive. But grief was not poor. Early suspicions. Who was Nikki Nickerson? In the early days of the investigation into Diane Peterson's murder, one name stood out to detectives: Harry "Nicky" Nickerson. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime. Although not a student at Branham High School, he quickly drew the attention of investigators for several reasons. Witness descriptions collected shortly after the murder led to the creation of a composite sketch. According to police, Nickerson bore a strong resemblance to the figure outlined by those early witness accounts. He was known in the area and had reportedly been seen near the school, though he had no official ties to it. The combination of his proximity, appearance, and age made him a person of interest. What truly intensified suspicion, however, was a witness statement that surfaced during the initial investigation. According to this witness, Nickerson had confessed to committing the murder. The same witness also claimed to have seen Nickerson in possession of a knife with the words, "Teacher dear" engraved on the blade, a chilling detail that connected both a potential motive and a specific weapon to the crime. Despite the apparent weight of the witness's statement, the investigation hit a wall. The police were unable to find any additional evidence that could corroborate the confession. The knife described by the witness was never recovered, and no physical evidence was available to support the claim. Prosecutors reviewed the available facts and ultimately concluded that there wasn't enough to bring charges. Although Nickerson was seen as a leading suspect, the case remained technically open and unresolved. The lack of forensic evidence, combined with the failure to locate the knife, created an evidentiary gap that couldn't be bridged at the time. Years passed, and Nickerson's name remained tied to the case, albeit unofficially. He was never arrested or formally accused, but his connection was never forgotten. Investigators had him in their sights, yet the system required the knife and the missing link. Among the most disturbing details to emerge in the early investigation was the mention of a knife, allegedly inscribed with the words, "Teacher dear." According to a witness, Nicky Nickerson not only confessed to Diane Peterson's murder, but was also seen carrying this uniquely marked weapon. The claim gave investigators a concrete object to search for, possible murder weapon with a personal message, seemingly tied to the victim. However, the promise of this lead quickly dimmed. Despite the vivid description, police were never able to locate the knife. No physical evidence was found at the crime scene that matched the weapon described by the witness. Without the blade, there was no way to confirm whether such an object truly existed, or whether it had any connection to the case. The missing knife became a symbolic void in the investigation. It represented the piece that could have tied together the circumstantial evidence, the witness testimony, and the suspect profile. If found, it might have allowed forensic experts to test for fingerprints or biological traces. Instead, its absence left law enforcement with little more than hearsay. The claim about the inscription also raised questions. Teacher dear was specific, almost poetic in its wording, and pointed directly at the victim's identity. If true, it would have suggested intent and possible premeditation. Yet, without the knife in hand, there was no way to verify the story or establish motive. For the prosecution, the lack of physical evidence surrounding the weapon created a legal impasse. Even with a named suspect and a reported confession, a courtroom demands more than unverified. The cold case that wouldn't die despite the lack of physical evidence and the failure to prosecute, Diane Peterson's murder case was never officially closed. Over the course of nearly 5 decades, it remained a cold case, open but unsolved. Files were revisited, leads were re-examined, and witness statements were periodically reviewed by new sets of eyes. What made this case endure wasn't just the brutality of the crime, it was the continued commitment of law enforcement and the enduring grief of Peterson's family. The decades following Peterson's death saw significant changes in forensic science and investigative methods. While the original investigation in 1978 relied heavily on eyewitness accounts and physical evidence, later reviews of the case were informed by evolving technology and shifts in how cold cases were handled. However, without new material evidence, progress remained limited. For Peterson's family, time did little to dull the pain. Though they largely remained private throughout the years, their appreciation for law enforcement's dedication was eventually shared in a simple but heartfelt statement. "Thank you for not giving up for 47 years." Those words, spoken decades after the loss, captured the emotional weight the case carried for her loved ones, and the investigators determined to bring resolution. The case's longevity also made it a rare example of persistent investigative effort. In many jurisdictions, cold cases fade quietly into archives. But this one was different. The nature of the crime, a teacher killed on school grounds, and specificity of the original lead kept it from being forgotten. Peterson's name and the details of her death continued to circulate in law enforcement discussions year after year. Every generation of detectives who reviewed the case. Closure after 47 years in 2024. Nearly 47 years after Diane Peterson was murdered at Branham High School, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office made a long-awaited announcement. The case had been solved. At a press conference, Deputy District Attorney Rob Baker confirmed that the person responsible for the 1978 stabbing was Harry Nicky Nickerson, who had been just 16 years old at the time of the crime. The announcement did not come with dramatic new forensic breakthroughs or shocking twists. Instead, it was the result of persistent re-examination of the original case materials. Over the years, Nickerson had remained a person of interest, largely due to a witness account that tied him to both a confession and a knife with the inscription, "Teacher dear." Despite the lack of physical evidence, that testimony and other circumstantial links kept Nickerson's name in the case files. During the 2024 press briefing, officials clarified that Nickerson was never enrolled as a student at Branham High School, correcting earlier assumptions made during the original investigation. This clarification was crucial in understanding how he might have accessed the school during the time of the crime and further confirmed that his presence on campus had been unusual and unauthorized. While exact details surrounding the new developments that led to formal identification were not disclosed, authorities expressed confidence in naming Nickerson as the killer. His death prior to the announcement meant that no charges would ever be filed, but for the Peterson family and the investigators who spent decades pursuing justice, the resolution brought long-sought closure. A family member, speaking anonymously, thanked those involved for their dedication and persistence. Diane was a beautiful and wonderful person who is missed dearly. The statement read, "It was a reminder that even after nearly half a century, the pain of loss had never truly faded, but so too had the hope for answers never disappeared." This